In the last lecture, we installed Axios. Let me now import Axios from Axios, that's the package name, in the signup.view file. So this import statement is all we need for now. With this import statement, I can now use Axios, and that's the default export of the Axios package, and make HTTP requests through it. Now, the goal is to make an HTTP request to our Firebase backend. So there, I want to essentially target this URL we can see here. Go back to our application. To make such a request, I want to do this in the onSubmit method, which is fired when we submit the form, where I right now only output the data. To make such a request, I'll now reach out to Axios there. And there we get a couple of methods for the different HTTP requests. Get for a GET request, and POST for a POST request, and PUT for a PUT request, and so on. Now I want to store data on Firebase, and for that we can use the PUT or the POST request. POST if we plan on essentially creating an array of data on the backend, PUT if we just want to write one object. Now I want to create an array of users, at least theoretically. So I will call POST. Now the POST method from Axios now requires at least two arguments. The URL as a string, and here I will not just target our Firebase database like this, but I want to target a to be created and therefore automatically created users node. And for Firebase specifically, we need to append .json at the end. Now this is only required to target a valid endpoint on Firebase. It's not something you have to do because of Axios or something like that. We did this in earlier lectures too. So that's the URL, the first argument. The second argument Axios POST requires is the data. Well, actually it doesn't require this, but a POST request typically sends some data. So here I just want to send form data, which is this JavaScript object. And Axios will automatically stringify this and therefore send a valid data piece to the backend. You could pass a third argument, a JavaScript object, where you can pass additional configuration for the request. You can learn more about available config options in the Axios documentation I showed you. And I will also dive into some things you can configure on Axios in general, and which you then always can also configure on a per request level later in this module. So that's the POST request. Axios then returns a promise on the POST method. So we can chain then to do something once the promise resolves. Because of course, sending such a POST request is an asynchronous task, and therefore we can react to the result at some point in the future, and that's exactly why we use a promise here. So in this then block, we can now create a function which executes the code once the request is done. And here I will simply use a ES6 arrow function. You could use a normal function with the function keyword. Again, I'll use an arrow function. So we will at some time of the future get back a response, and then I simply want to log that. So I got a very short arrow function here. You can also chain a catch block to catch any potential errors and then do something with them. Maybe something more meaningful than just logging them here. You could, for example, simply set some property in your component and then output something in your template depending on that property. But here I want to focus on Axios, hence this simple solution. So now we got all the code it takes to send a request with Axios. Let's see if that works. Make sure that Firebase is configured correctly, that the rules allow everyone to write and read. And thereafter, let's simply go back to our application and let's enter something here into this form. So for now, this doesn't have to be valid. You can enter anything you want. You can also leave out fields. Let's enter a hobby here and click submit. Before doing that, however, let me open the JavaScript console so that we can actually see something there. Let's now click submit. And we see two things. The first object here is coming from this console log statement. But thereafter, the second output we see is coming from the console log statement in the then block here. And you see that we got a status code of 200, so it was successful. You also see data here. In this case, it's just a key value pair with a name and then some cryptic string. And that actually is the ID of the data it received on the backend, so in Firebase. If we switch to Firebase, you see a new users node was created, and if you expand this, here you see that same cryptic string that is just a unique ID created automatically by Firebase, and there you see all the user data stored. So submitting the data to the backend did work correctly, and that is already how we can use Axios, just importing it and then calling post. And of course it works in the same way for other requests, get, put, and so on. Let's actually see a get request in action in the next lecture.